Good morning, Denise Dryden. I'm here in Montana now. So I'm on a different time zone. I've returned back to the Flathead Valley, which has been a home of mine for 8 years before I was out on Bainbridge. So today I want to talk about, in this weekly video, what happens when parenting can turn into something destructive. What happens when we, despite our best intentions, despite trying our best at all times, it ends up being just a tad bit destructive, right? And so what I want to do is I want to look at especially this generation of the Zoomers. So we're looking at probably 1997 forward. Their ending period can be anywhere between 2012, 2013, 2014. I'm still looking at the definition of when the alpha, the next generation, starts. So we're really looking at 24 years and under. And so for those of us who are parenting, those of us who are teaching, those of us who are grandparenting, there's this real crucial issue of what happens when we have a certain generational, a certain specific way of approaching things, and it can be detrimental to the children that we want to, the children we want to steward, the children we want to bring forward, right? So what happens is that a really good friend of mine talked about being able to sit up above the San Francisco Bay and watch the confluence of the outgoing tide meeting the incoming tide. And if you know what to look for, there's this rim, or there's this line through the water where you can see how these two are coming up against each other. So what we're really looking at is the boomer generation and the Gen Xers and sort of their patterning, their, all of our old stuff hitting up against these new kids and what they need. So these are really unique kids, right? They're creative, they're intelligent, they're observant. They have higher numbers of sensitivity at an earlier age than we were ever even aware of, right? They're multidimensional. They learn really differently than the rest of us. They don't want the traditional going to school, doing homework, getting the grade so that they can get into college. That's not the track that they foresee for themselves. Yet it's our track, it's what we know, right? They hold a really different frequency. They hold a frequency that means that they are up someplace else in another vibration following that, and we may be just slightly off or there but not able to feel it the same way, or it may be very extreme frequency differentiations, right? So this is happening. They have a confidence about them that they know what this world is about, and they have an idea of where it's going to go. And then they also have these really deep anxiety issues or depression issues where they don't know how to adjust into a culture that doesn't really fit for them, right? They are very flexible and yet can have to stay in a very certain way of doing things. And there's judgment that comes from parents, comes from grandparents. How come you can't just get him up in the morning? How come I never had that problem with you guys. And so there's these pieces of judgment that are around them, right? So they're here to dismantle all of that old stuff. Makes sense, right? So there are destructive energetic conflicts that absolutely happen. So these destructive energetic things, they're invisible. They don't necessarily show up as behaviors like, no, I'm not going to do that. They're going to be much more beyond the sight. They're going to feel it, right? And it is also based on what we were imprinted with. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you hear the voice of your parent who's a boomer, who was raised by parents who were like, 6 o'clock dinner time, everybody's home for dinner, and you're not doing a good job unless you give your kids a hot meal. That's that voice. The old 1950s, 60s voice of like father, mother knows best, right? And you're trying your very best to get dinner or something for the kids to eat. And so you're trying to enforce or something that you know is important or that you hear is important from your inner voice. And the kids are looking at you like, what are you doing? I'll eat when I'm hungry. And so like this is the example of where the clash comes in, right? So some of another one of those destructive energetic conflicts is what happens when we have beliefs and desires and experiences that are different than our children's. You know, what happens when we believe that we need to have a religion, we need to have a structure. We believe that that you pick a degree in college, and one that will pay the bills in the future. These are our experiences of what we've known based on what we experience, you know, what our parents experienced and what they asked us to do or we didn't do, right? Or we stumbled into it. These are our beliefs and our desires that get in the way. Sometimes these invisible destructive things can be unresolved expectations, or the inability to explore old patterns, which is what happens when I have an immediate reaction to going in when my son is supposed to be doing homework and he's got the video games on, and I have a repetitive response to that over and over and over again. What happens when I don't know what's going on with me when that happens, right? And there's this rigidity and control, which is I don't know what to do, so I'm going to clench in a little bit tighter, and I'm going to move this kid or these kids into a place where life can be a little bit easier. So there's a little bit of force, there's a little bit of strife, there's a little bit of powering over, there's a little bit of control, and these kids are looking at you like, what are you doing, Mom? What are you doing, Dad? Right? So these issues, they foster this kind of pressure, right? That there's this, and when these come up, the pressure comes from a lot of different places, especially if you're externally driven, especially if you care about what your parents think, or you care about what the teachers think of you as a parent, or you care about what your neighbors think, or you care about what your friends think. I can't tell my friends that my son got a C or is failing a class. This is what happens when we're people pleasing and when we're looking outside of ourselves and we're trying to help this kiddo, this beautiful little kiddo, keep up with what the expectations on the outside are. So there's this pressure, right, that's being fostered. There's self-judgment and anger, maybe at ourselves, which is, I must not be doing this very well. And then that anger comes out in a destructive way in the relationship, right? Or there's this inflexibility, as we talked about, is what happens when, and it can be based on your job. It can be based on your time constraints. It could be based on the information that you have. It could be based on the fact that you live in a location where you have to pay for it so much for a house. I just moved off of Bainbridge Island. Expensive place to live, right? You have to have a good job to live there. You have to keep that good job. You have to show up for that good job, which means that you don't have a lot of flexibility in creating an alternative lifestyle, especially if your child or children need that, okay? So these are some of the things that lead up to where there's some destruction that just hurts and undermines the positive relationship with children, okay? So the top destructive actions, I think, and I was paying attention to this all night last night, that there's four that I came up with that are probably the worst things that we can do when we're dealing with children. One is to enforce or force the traditional times, schedules, tracks that we believe or that we experienced onto our children, which is when you're 6, you should be in first grade, right? If if conflict comes up around school start or stop times or dinner time or bedtime, that those are rigid and that they're there for a reason, right? So when we are forcing a traditional timeline or a track through school or something like that, anytime we have something that's like, you got to go between these two lines, right? That's when it gets kind of sticky, okay? Second thing is, when we focus on careers to make money, when we're really looking at, you need math skills, you need science skills, because that's where you're going to be able to pay the bills in the future, and we forget about passion. We forget about creativity. We forget about the sensitivity of these children, and that they are much more creative than we thought. And we're trying to work around that, through that, but still give them that fundamental basis education that we think that they need, right? Common mistake. Number 3 is imprinting the conditions that you had when you were growing up, whether it's about grades, whether it is about college, whether it is about performance on sports, that you should be athletic, you should have this GPA, you need to build a resume if you want to get into a college. You need to, and this transference of our imprinted conditioning is something we experienced, and we kind of picked it up off of ourselves and said, I want to create a little mini me, and that person needs to go in the track. I'm going to give them some flexibility, of course, as to where they want to go, but they still need to follow that track. And what I do in my coaching over and over and over again with parents who have very creative children is say, what happens if they don't go to college? What happens if they take a year or 2 or 3 off? What happens if you let them decide what they want to do? And they're like, I can't. And so they're pushing and they're pushing and they're forcing, and they're hiring tutors, and they're going through counseling and programs and everything to try to get this kid into the track that they believe was best for them, so they want to duplicate it for their child. Number 4 is when you cover up or you hide or you downplay some of these unique characteristics of your child, some of their quirky things that you don't really want people to know, or maybe their anxiety levels, their depression, their video game use, their isolation, their substance use, or any kind of treatment that you're doing. You're not talking about the real stuff. You're hiding it. You're hiding it from yourself. You're hiding it from your family. I've had parents who've had children in 24-month programs, and they never told the parents what kind of a program their child was in, or they ever didn't want them to know. They didn't want their workmates to know. They didn't want their friends to know. So what that does is that puts this shame energy into the family relationship, into the parent-child relationship. So if you're hiding something because you don't want anyone to know what's going on with you and your kid, you're not being real, and your kid is going, what are you doing? Why am I such an embarrassment to you? Why are you hiding who I am, right? Actually, there's more. 5, not doing your own work. We're not realizing that some of this is you, and that some of your rigidity, some of your control, some of your issues are about where you got stuck. And if you don't do your own work, you don't know that that's not theirs, that this is yours, right? And so we have to do our own work. Number 6 is to have zero accountability for any kind of energetic management, which means I'm not aware that when we come up on the 15 minutes before school that I'm already pissed and triggered because of the past, and I'm huffing and I'm puffing and I'm reminding and I'm doing things, and we're not realizing that we're spreading this energetic mood into the house, right? So our moods, our angers, our control, our timelines, our own worries, we're not understanding that this is an energetic management that takes place over the house, right? Or the last one, which is to focus on changing the child. It's like we're all going this track. This child, we want to give him or her some freedoms, but we need them to follow, to get with the plan, right? So there's shame. Like, after everything I've done for you, I can't believe that this has to happen every single morning, right? Or blame, which is we are late for school every day because of you. Or anger, which is I don't want to do this again. I'm going to scream and yell at you until you physically get in the car. So what we don't understand is that this is us trying to change the child to match what we believe is right. And what we have is an entire generation of children, 2 generations between the Zoomers and the Alphas, who are coming in and going, your world, the way you used to do things, we have to dismantle that, and we have to start doing something different. So they're there to sort of teach you to loosen up, right? To let go of some things. So I have tips. I always have tips, right? Because I don't present this information and then just leave you hanging. First tip is to develop your own observation skills, right? What are you noticing? What are you seeing? It's like, oh, I have a great relationship with my daughter. And the rest of the day, it's just really, really hard in the morning because I can't be late for work. So you start to notice the patterns, and you start to notice and you put them together. So you notice, you see, you put together patterns, and you look at the consistency so that your observation skills really give you some feedback. Okay? Use muscle testing. Use yes, no's. I do this thing where it's like, if it locks, it's a yes. If it slides, it's a no. And when I don't know what to do, I yes, no it, which is am I having a problem? Yes. Oh, crap. This is my stuff. This isn't even the child. So it can confirm, it can stop you. It can allow you to shift into something immediately when you allow yourself to go out of your head, go over and use a system that lets you know that there's a problem and that the problem may not be what you think, right? Next one, set up flexibility around key areas of struggle. That might look like, and I had to do this with my youngest child, which is, we have a problem in the morning, and when we get there, we get there. And we will get there as soon as we can. But if I have to hold rigidly to this time, and I can, get up earlier, and I can make mornings calmer, and I could do this and that, and I'm going to work my best at what this issue is that comes up in the mornings, right? But I need flexibility. I need flexibility at the house. I need flexibility at work. I need flexibility on her performance or his performance and grades. I need some flexibility so that I can start to work with what's going on, because the rigidity coming from the school system or the teachers or the sports or whatever is going on may not be helping right now, right? So you start to set up flexible areas. Number 4, next one, explore your own attachments. Where do they come from? Man, how did I get into this? You're a bad person if you're late. You're a bad person if you get C's and D's. You're a horrible mother if you have children who haven't turned their homework in or don't have activities, or fill in the blank. These are the things that we want to find out where your attachments are, which is, I've always wanted to live in this kind of community at this kind of socioeconomic level, but it is hurting my children and I in our relationship. So how do I become a little bit less attached to what I always thought I wanted when my children are telling me that they don't, right? Next one, add multidimensionality to all of your skill sets, which is, it's one thing to sort of look at it this way and say, okay, we're going to be late for school, right? It's another thing to come up over here and go, well, look at this. It's almost like the more angry I get, the slower she moves. Oh, that's interesting. Look at over here there's, one sibling is cool with this and one sibling's not. And then you start to watch from 3 or 4 different perspectives, and then you're like, well, all of them are right. All of them make sense. They're just different from each other. So I know there is not only one way to do something, right? That multidimensionality gives you the ability to create more options. And the last one, of course, is to follow your passion. Absolutely follow your passion, because there's times when our kids are in these places where we start to get destructive in forcing things because we're holding on to something that isn't really working for us either, but our kids are trying to send us a message. So I think, to me, this is what 2020 was all about, is that we had the ability to sort of step back from financial, spending, step back from, in some ways, from commute times, from workloads, from school, from activities, and we had to spend a lot of time at home figuring out what was important to us. And I have seen many, many families changing careers, moving to more flexible hours, part-time, insisting on working out of the house because it works for their family system, but to follow their passion, to follow what works for them. So these are the kind of things I do each week on Sunday mornings. Now on Mountain Time Zone. You can get a hold of me at DeniseDrydenCoaching.com, and I'm going to start putting out some little shorter blurbs on different platforms so that there's more information going out, and then there's still this nice big one on Sunday. So you take care. Have a great week. Spring equinox was yesterday, so we're in it. We're heading towards spring. Enjoy. Take care.